If you're spending half of your time with your customers of your work week, then you might succeed. If you spend more than half, you might be succeeding faster. If you spend less than half, you might be in danger of losing grip on your market. What you need to do is you need to map out in which way is that which I'm developing later on possibly integratable in terms of the larger system. And that gives you then also an idea of when you have possibly an exit from your company that you want to do this, or where do you want to have an additional funding round from somebody who is actually providing the system's context for what you do.
Selamat datang di Radar, sebuah rangkuman wawasan inisiatif dari Kadin, Badan Riset dan Teknologi Bidang Digital. Hari ini kami menghadirkan para pemikir dunia untuk membicarakan, menanggapi, tantangan dan peluang di industri teknologi.
So Peter, thank you so much for coming to Indonesia. I think before we discuss more further, would love to have a bit of background about yourself.
I'm the chairman of the World Summit Awards, which I founded 20 years ago in order to make sure that the diversity and the richness of creativity with digital technologies from around the world is having a stage, that we can see it, it becomes visible, and that we can promote that. We use a mechanism of a global award scheme, a global competition, in 184 countries, member states of the United Nations, to reach out to the different kind of ecosystems. And we have yearly a participation of 400 to 500 entries through eminent national experts. And then we have a very elaborate jury system so that we have then in 8 categories, 5 winners. We came to Jakarta to have the grand jury meeting. So before Jakarta, there was an online jury which selected 134 entries, and then we had a nomination list of 62, and out of the 62 there are now 40 winners, and I'm very happy to tell you that 2 winners are from Indonesia.
That's great. It's really an honor to having you here. Just quick some anecdote a bit. My startups also applied to World Summit Awards back in 2018. But unfortunately, we didn't win the awards.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Maybe you have another try.
Yeah. I think that's a signal that I need to work even harder to push the companies moving forward. So again, I think we've discussed previously before, the topic that we'd love to hear from you, especially from your experience, your rich experience and views, is the current startups ecosystem facing a bit difficulties. We've seen even unicorns, decacorns, public listed companies facing difficulties of fundraise. Even some of them require to lay off their teams. Even unfortunately, some startups need to close down their companies. From your experience and views across the globe, is it a trend that can we bypass that trend? Because we've seen that COVID hit the startups industry, slow down the economy, and then we've seen different wars also happening. And what is your view for the upcoming industry, especially for the next 2 years across the globe? And if you're open to it, we'd love to understand your view also in Indonesia startup ecosystem as well.
There are different ways in which you become a successful startup. Within the World Summit Award, our experience has been over the last 20 years that those startups are more resilient in terms of changes in the environment, including COVID, including the funding withdrawal, in the issues of not meeting many different kind of VCs and so on, that those are more resilient, where people have a very clear idea of the problem which they are addressing with the technology, and where they are having a good way of looking at the solution in a flexible way, because they are personally involved in the issue, which is the problem. What we see is that there's a lot of people moving out of the startup space now, and losing also the grip on things, where you have basically imitation startups. People who are taking a business model from somebody else, just tweaking it a little bit and saying, okay, I can do the same thing. And then you have 5 different, food delivery companies which use bicycles or motorcycles to bring pizza, That is a kind of service, when you have, 1 or 2 in the city, that is basically covering the need of the population there. So what we see is very much that need-based, pain-based, where there is a social hurt, that these startups are resilient and they are going to weather the situation better than others. The other thing is, I think, which is quite important, is I don't see that money itself has become, let's say, scarcer, or that money is withdrawn. What is more difficult is to get at the right people with the right mindset for the right issue. And that is something, where we have had in COVID the situation that the matching has been impeded. So it is those events which are now helping people to meet the right people, where the matching is actually quite good. That works well. And those work well where there are established networks and people are in the networks. So I'm quite optimistic, actually, in terms of, especially, I see that even outside of the global hubs, there's a lot of startup activity going on. I see it very much in Eastern Europe, for instance, very, very strong. I see it also in some parts of Africa. I see in Nigeria, for instance, there's a lot of activity there. And I hope that Indonesia will be also in that situation, because what I have seen now, having met with Shinta and other people, having had today also meetings with the minister and others, I see that there is a real interest in growing companies in an innovative way. And I think that in terms of especially the creative economy, Indonesia has all the cards to play. You have a very young population, you have a very, very strong basis in terms of the creative arts. And I think what you need to do is you need to leverage the market which you have, which is large enough in order to grow things also on a global scale. Yes.
Interesting. You mentioned, especially in Indonesia, we talk about Indonesia, you mentioned we have basically all of the cards that we can use.
Yeah.
We'd love to understand from your view as well, from your experience, what do you think that government should participate in terms of the growing industry, especially in Indonesia, comparing that how the other government helping startup industry in different countries, different region. What do you think that, from your view, Indonesian government can help even more startup in Indonesia?
I think one of the most important things is that young people who are involved in startups, that they have enough access to entrepreneurial mentoring, and that the government regulations for startups in terms of setting up the legal structure is flexible enough. So what we are talking about, for instance, in some European countries, is to really reduce the overhead which you have in order to set up a legal structure for a startup, and that you have for the first 3 years of your company, you don't have to go through all the registration issues and things like this, but that you have a very slimmed down process, you know. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that you are setting up yourself responsibly, but that you are not over bureaucratized. And one of the things which is here quite important is that you're not being taxed at the very beginning. You know, in some situations, you know, people have to, pay taxes even before they have sold a product. You know, and that is a real issue and a real problem. And the other thing is, I think what needs to be done is governments have to understand that startups are never on a straight path. It's always a journey, which you go zigzag, you go back, and often it is that your original idea was not the most, let's say, successful idea, but the team has started to work together well. And therefore, in the course of working together as a team, you create, you know, a kind of know-how pool, a competence pool, a skills pool, an attitude, you know, to work with each other. That you are saying, okay, now that we have 15 people, you know, we really are ready for another challenge. And then you pick a different kind of issue, or you're working this. I have started a number of startups myself, and every time it is, like in many other cases, you know, that the original idea has not worked out the same way as we thought. And also one of the things which you really need to do is you need to see that some ideas work under certain kinds of conditions of technology, but then the technology evolves and it's not relevant anymore in the same way. So what is really important is to stay very focused, keep it simple and slim in terms of what is your business proposition, and communicate early enough and interact early enough with your customers. Many startups suffer that people talk to each other, they talk to the developers, but they don't talk enough to the customers.
Interesting.
So what you need to do is measure your time. If you're spending half of your time with your customers of your work week, then you might succeed. If you spend more than half, you might be succeeding faster. If you spend less than half, you might be in danger of losing grip on your market.
So I think there's really great insight for every entrepreneur, founders who try to building their company, even for me as well. If you spend less than 50%, that's the bad news for us. Lastly, you mentioned a couple of key important things for entrepreneur, but I would like to dig deeper from your amazing experience, your wealth of knowledge, and your view from different regions, different countries. What will be two key important sense for entrepreneur need to understand and hold it till the company is successful and beyond, from your point of view, the two core sense, especially that, so everyone that can listen, especially for me as well, will be keep it and will be remembered it, so our companies, our startups will be successful and giving impact to everyone that would like to provide the impact.
Yeah. I think the first thing is don't hesitate to ask the money question. Okay?
Just ask.
Ask the money question. Ask your customers, what are you really willing to pay for? You know? And then you realize very quickly that if you are insistent enough on the money question, then your customers will start seeing that you are not satisfied with them telling you what would be nice to have. They have to tell you what do they need to have in order to pay for it. Okay? So a lot of customers, mislead even, startups by saying, okay, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And so on. And then you have to ask them, would you be willing to pay for this? Would you be willing to pay for that? Would you be willing to pay for this? And what's the package which you need in order to do that? Okay? So, and I think that's very, very important. And the other thing is you have to be really So first thing is the money question. The second thing is you have to really say, okay, what is my value proposition? So if you have, for instance, something, where you're suggesting, I'm swapping my battery, and we're doing this and this and that and so on. So it's easy that you start thinking that you have to be a manufacturer of motorcycles, and then you have to, have a whole grid, a smart grid, and then you need to have, photovoltaic stations, and so you're getting distracted. You need to say, okay, what is it actually what we are really focusing on, where we want to create the value? And I think that has to relate to what we talked before. You cannot spend enough time doing research and having a conversations with your customers on what are the pain points. You need to really understand what people want to have and in which way you are offering something which is more innovative. And then I say, you asked me about two things, and I say a third thing, which is important, is really check on in which way you are different and possibly even better than anybody else who is offering already a solution for this issue. A lot of startups are doing not enough research, not enough, let's say, providing intelligence on what are other things which are happening. And now I'm telling you a fourth thing is, and that is, startups are always in a situation that you have something, where you are thinking about one issue, one problem, one solution. In the end, what customers want is something which is integrated into an entire system. So what you need to do is you need to map out in which way is that which I'm developing later on possibly integratable in terms of the larger system. And that gives you then also an idea of when you have possibly an exit from your company that you want to do this, or where do you want to have an additional funding round from somebody who is actually providing the system's context for what you do.
Those are four amazing things. Is there any other suggestion, the fifth one?
Yes, give me your credit card and I'll run with it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your interest.
I hope you have amazing experience in Indonesia. For sure, would love to have you back here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Would love to have more partnership with you. Hopefully, if I submit my startups in World Summit Awards, I'll have a chance to win it.
Yes, you have to talk to Shinta and make sure that they have a fair process. Yeah? Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good.